Welcome to the Nerds and Friends podcast. Today we are very honored to have, along with my co-hosts Carey DuVal and Will Shaw, Sara Fujimura, the author and expert on Japanese culture and animes, and we'll let you explain everything you know about. We're really excited to have you here today.
Hey guys, I'm really excited to be here with you.
Awesome.
Well, I'll introduce myself if you don't mind.
Let's go for it.
Go right ahead.
Hajimemashite, dozo yoroshiku onegai shimasu. Fujimura Sara desu. Phoenix, Arizona ni sunde imasu. Kore wa watashi no atarashi honga desu. Faking Reality to imasu. So hi, I'm Sara Fujimura. I'm from Phoenix, Arizona. This is my new book and it's called Faking Reality. And
That's awesome.
say that I'm an expert Japanese culture, but I have been married to a Japanese man for 27 years, and we have been attempting to be a bicultural, bilingual family. We are not completely there yet. He's the only one who is truly both, but working on it.
That's so cool. I love that.
I cannot hold the conversation, but I was able to understand a little bit of your introduction there.
Oh, Will, I didn't realize you studied Japanese. That's awesome.
I'm terrible at all languages, including English.
Funny you bring that up. I'm pretty sure the person I'm dating would have understood just about everything that you said. So
that's awesome.
So konnichiwa.
And that idea of and this is the new reality. So if you're listening to this, you can't see me. I'm a middle-aged white woman. I have to stand up here, wearing my Wonder Woman shirt.
Yes,
but
love it.
I've been a nerd for a long time. I've been a nerd since I was about 12, and you know the stereotype of the Big Bang Theory kind of nerds. Yeah, that was me back in the day. But now
sounds about right.
Fanfusion, which is our Comic-Con. We're just not allowed to call it Comic-Con. And I usually booth there. But what I really love is working in the anime cons, because I love working with teens. That's why I write for teens. And it's just a different vibe, but at the same time, it's that same thing that we love. So whatever your deep dive is, that just having friends and we can just geek out over whatever is special to you, and people will celebrate you and want to celebrate with you. It's I know, have you seen it? Let's get together
awesome.
and watch it, kind of thing. So
are you going to be at Sabaton Con then?
I'm sorry?
Are you going to be at Sabaton then?
Yes, I'm the Obento lady.
You're what now?
I am the Obento lady at Sabaton Con. I've been doing Sabaton for about 10 years now. So I'm in Artist Alley in the back.
Oh, hell yeah.
And I sell bento boxes and egg molds and onigiri stuff and cutters and picks and all the things to make your lunch fun and good for you and good for the environment, because you're not putting plastic baggies in the landfill.
That's amazing.
That is very amazing.
That's so cool. Carey, are you going to be going to that con as well?
I will be at that con as well. I'll be assisting at a booth, so I'll be there to come say hi then.
Yeah, please do, because one of the things that I've been doing for a while, I sell this stuff, but I also I want to teach young people how to cook and how to, it's meal prep. Obento is meal prep. It's just a fancy way, but that idea of using that as an entryway for a lot of people, where maybe they wouldn't cook, but now because it's a Japanese thing, then it's special. And then I like to teach them things that are very easy to make, but they look really fancy. Because we were talking about making zaru soba, and so that's just buckwheat noodles, but if you put it on the correct plate and you have the special sauce, and then you go to H Mart and you buy the ebi fry, the little fried shrimp that they're already tempered and everything, but you just put them in the oven and then you put them on the nice plate with the nice chopsticks, and now you have a romantic dinner for two, or all your anime, your cosplay friends are coming over, your anime friends are coming over, and they're so impressed with you, and you're so easy and cheap.
That's so awesome. I love that.
That's really interesting. What got you into meal prep, specifically this kind of meal prep as your thing, especially for running a booth and
So I have to back up a little bit. So I didn't know anything about anime, even though I've been going to Japan, except for the last 2 summers. I've been going to Japan every summer for the last 15 years. And we stay with my in-laws out in Gifu Prefecture, so we're rice paddy kind of area. And my mother-in-law is a retired English teacher, so teachers love to teach, and the good thing is I want to learn. So she's always teaching and telling me, and she can answer all my questions. And I'm a foodie at heart, and that's how I connect to Japanese culture. Some people attached to a Japanese culture through anime or karate or kaiju or whatever your specialty is, but for me it's always been food. So I eat all the time in Japan. but how I got started in the anime community was a little bit different. So my daughter, at the time, she and her friends really loved anime, and they started building. They wanted to do cosplay. So this was 10 years ago. So now they're funny because they talk about little baby weebs, because they're like 23 to 25, and all these little baby weebs getting started with their Hatsune Miku outfits on that they bought from Hot Topic, and their wigs that they bought from China. And when they got started, they wanted to build, but they had to build from scratch because there wasn't that much out there. And so it was my daughter's Girl Scout troop. We were like the geekiest Girl Scouts ever.
Nice.
We did all kinds of like building, and some of them are engineers now. And so they were making their cosplays and sewing things. I taught them how to make a straight stitch so they could make like bandanas for dogs for a service project. And now they're building like 3-dimensional ball gowns and like cutting stuff on the electric, cutters and all this kind of stuff.
Awesome.
So when I started with them, they were 12, 13, 14 years old. And I'm like, oh, no, you're not going to the con by yourself. I'm going to be the con mom walking 2 steps behind you. Well, that got to be too embarrassing. So can you not? So what I did is, okay, what can I do that I'm here at the con, that I have eyes on the girls, but I'm not all up in their business? And so it's like, bento boxes, because again, this was 10 years ago. People didn't know what bentos were. Now you can go to Target and buy bento boxes. They're just not as cute as mine. Mine are special. But the ones
That's
I have.
awesome.
But just that idea of like the culture has changed, and that's how I got started, and I really loved it. And I love working with teens and teaching them how to do stuff, and I have them show me what they make, and it's like, you don't have to make like the super fancy ones that you spend an hour on every day. But some of them make these marvelous masterpieces, and I take pictures and they get like prizes. And so we've made it a thing. We've made it a thing, and nobody else was doing it. So I'm like, I look out of place anyway, because I'm like 25 years older than everybody else. But I'll be your mom. I'll be your mom to remind you to eat. Put the Red Bull down. Go eat something healthy.
I know the feeling.
That's so cool. And so for our listeners, I'm going to plug your website, and it'll be in the description for the video, but it's your name, Sara, Sara, and then Fujimura, Fujimura.com. And it has all of your wonderful stuff on there, and there'll be a link to it in the description. But tell us a little more about, you also teach people about writing, since you're an accomplished author yourself. I wanted to hear more about your writers' workshops and hear about how you got into doing that.
So I finished up this spring. I was the writer in residence at the Tempe Library in Arizona, and I got to work with all kinds of really cool people, and I never know what they were going to bring in. And there was days I'm like, I don't know what to do with this, but it was a good mental exercise for me too, because at the end of the day, storytelling is storytelling. And I say that all the time, especially when I work with teens at the library doing workshops with them. It's like, it doesn't matter if you are writing a screenplay, a novel, a D&D campaign, a video game that has a lot of plot to it. Good storytelling is good storytelling, and let's learn how to do that. And then you can put your own specific spin on it. You can put your own your fingerprint on it to make it so that people understand what it is. But there is that, I call it the universal specific, which is an oxymoron. So the universal is like, on a subconscious level, you understand what this story is, and yet you have never heard it before because it is in like a totally different universe, or it looks like this, but it's not. And so we're trying to learn how to write stories and that really resonate with people on a subconscious level.
That's a really interesting concept, because I was thinking about that in terms of things that seem to come out of nowhere in a big way. One of the big touchstones for me is the first Star Wars, A New Hope, episode 4, because that was really a divergent kind of sci-fi at the time, because it was a big swashbuckler, like sci-fi up until that point, or at least like the big trend during the point. It was either like it was either very sterile future, or it was like Buck Rogers kind of stuff, and like people rolling around and doing that kind of thing, and things kind of come in cycles. But it's the space opera is a really interesting thing, because it's an entirely new and completely weird thing, but the story that's being told is so like you said, universal, that the specifics of it around it don't really matter. It's kind of the same thing with the Michael Crichton novel. It's kind of a reverse thing with a Michael Crichton novel, where he will beat you with all the science up front, And so it feels super technical up front, but the way that it kind of melds together by the end, like Sphere is a great example of that.
I love
like
Sphere.
the way, yeah, it's a good movie, good book. But the way that it melds together by the end, you're on board with the reality. So it's really cool that that's the kind of thing that you're teaching kids. Like, it doesn't matter what the story is that you're telling, or people. It's like, it doesn't matter what story you're telling, just as long as you're, telling a story, because a story can be whatever the hell you want.
Yeah. What are some of the themes you like to explore in your books, Sarah?
Identity. That's the number one that I do, because when I started writing, so I have 3 contemporary YA books and 1 historical fiction, and they're a little bit different, but at the same time they're the same. They're in the same bucket of who am I, and am I who I am because I choose to be, or you told me to be. That's who I am. And then pushing against identity. And one of the things with Every Reason We Shouldn't, which came out before Faking Reality, was the idea of so if you let me back up a little bit. So this Every Reason We Shouldn't is about a figure skater, washed up figure skater at 15 years old. All her eggs are in one basket. This is what she does. And yes, it's like a bigger version of what like a lot of kids are. So if you have kids, and that idea of like, oh, we when you're 5, you get to try different little things, and then once they find which one you're good at, that is now your thing. That is your thing. That is what you do. That's all you do. You don't have, like when I was a young kid, like Monday we do this, and Tuesday we do this, and Wednesday it's like, no, we are on a soccer team. We want to play varsity soccer because the scouts are going to come, so we're going to play club soccer. We're going to do soccer camps over winter break. We're going to do soccer. So soccer. Now, there's a difference between I did something stupid and I took myself out of the game because I was too much of a hotshot, and that's one type of story. But it's a different type of story when you did your absolute best and it wasn't enough. And this is a realistic thing that I see a lot of kids are facing right now, and thanks to COVID. So, for example, like let's say you went to the prep school, you are going to be the valedictorian, you're going to be the one who's giving the speech to all the people, and then in June of 2020, they're like, oh, so we're not having graduation this year, but you get to stand in the parking lot and wave because you're special. Like, I'm a disappointment. Or like, I've been busting my butt for all these years, and now I'm I'm on the quarterback of the varsity football team. The scouts are supposed to come. It's like, yeah, sorry, we're not having football this fall. And so those everybody had their own disappointment. And my flavor of disappointment was my first traditionally published book was about to come out. It came out 2 weeks before we went into lockdown. I was supposed to be at the Tucson Festival of Books. I was supposed to be out on book tour, and it went into the COVID abyss.
Yeah.
It's the Charlie Brown and the football. So what was your personal flavor of disappointment?
Well, for me, it was I worked in the film industry at the time, and it was they were like, we're shutting down production on everything, and I was like, I don't have a job anymore. So that was my personal flavor of it.
The guy who's doing the thing.
Yep.
What about you, Carey? What was your flavor of disappointment?
Mine was actually right before the pandemic, about a year before. I was in the Army, and I got to a pretty high level of training, and then the whole thing got pulled out from under my feet. So basically, I got basically right to the finish line of something extremely cool that was like my dream job, and then it got yanked, and it got yanked in a big way that like messed me up for a long time. So and then immediately after COVID lockdown, and I'm also getting out of the Army at the same time. So it was a whole thing.
That's so much change at once, dude. That's
that is a lot. What about you, Will? What was your personal flavor of disappointment?
Oh, like pandemic related, nothing changed for me at all. I had other stuff going on in my personal life that and I think that's just kind of a human thing, is like there's always this transitional period. But I think some people especially talking with the pandemic, like that's just a huge event that's now defining this coming of age for so many people. I was one of the lucky people where I'm already an introvert. I live in my little apartment here online. Literally nothing changed in my life because of it. So I lucked out there, but it's more of just like going through this with everybody else that kind of changed for me.
Yeah, because it really affected everyone so much. It's been such a crazy
tumultuous couple of years.
Yeah, for sure.
So my second book that came out was Indie Pub. It's called Breathe. It came out in 2018 in time for the 100th anniversary of the Spanish flu. And when it came out, people were like, oh, okay, that's nice. Yeah, now 2 years later, I did not know that I was writing a prophetic book. And my friends even teased me about it because they was like, oh my gosh, all the stuff that you wrote is happening now. And even some of the ridiculous stuff. So one of the things that they used to tell people during the Spanish flu, because they were desperate, was that if you put kerosene on sugar cubes and feed it to your children, that will keep them from getting the Spanish flu. And we're like, well, that's dumb. Who would do that? And yet we have people, what horse parasitics and stuff. So that idea of like, when you are that desperate, you will try anything. Or they were talking like, you know what, you will keep your children safe if you have them wear onions around their neck. And it totally worked because you stunk so bad that they ended up doing, social distancing. But that idea of like they were fighting over masks, wearing masks on mass transportation. They were fighting over because it was also World War I was coming to an end, not having enough supplies. And they were already rationing stuff anyway, but that idea of people fighting over medicine, the haves and the have-nots, and women could not vote yet. We were almost there. So women were chaining themselves to the White House gate, being a pain in the butt to the president. And like, wow. And there's even one little teeny tiny section about how Margaret Sanger she's a complicated person. There's some things that, she's not good, but she is like the mother of birth control. And so, we're still talking about that. So those things are like, oh my gosh, we are still talking about the same things.
It's 100 years later.
Yeah, it's weird how much like 100 years feels like a long time, and it's not all at the same time. Yeah. Because like you think about and on a very greedy sense, I think about the amount of good authors that we got out of that greatest generation, the guys that went through that much shit. Like we got Tolkien out of that. Tolkien, like being a friggin' linguistics professor at Oxford, and like literally teaching students, and The Hobbit was his way of stringing together stories that he told his kids, and that was a guy who was at the Somme, and you can't, and we're getting like a lot of hardship right now that I think is going to turn out some very interesting ways that people interpret themselves, especially in the fact that, I'm really glad that you brought up that you teach people how to tell stories regardless of medium, because Dungeons and Dragons is a big one. People improving, podcasting. I personally I am, for the first time in more than a decade, I'm getting back into video games as a genre, and how much effort people put into telling a good story on that, which I think it fascinates me how good that stuff is.
That's awesome.
So one of the things that I tell the teens that I work with a lot is I ask them, it's like, so how many of you out there write fan fiction? And a lot of them do. I'm like, do people give you crap about writing fan fiction? They're like, yes. It's like, well, let me tell you a little something. Let's say you want to work for Disney and you want to write for an established show. Guess what they're going to ask you to do? They're going to ask you to write a script that's already done. They want to see your new ones too, but they want you to write. So guess what that is? It's fan fiction. If you were writing on an established show, that's fan fiction. So it's like, just you do you, because it's teaching you how to do pacing and all this stuff. And when you're ready to switch over, or you want to be Cassandra Clare, you want to write who else is like Marissa Myers came out of like Sailor Moon kind of stuff, and the one that's known the most is like 50 Shades of Grey came out of Twilight and stuff, which we're not going to talk about that.
I think it goes way farther back there, because like even if you go back to like 1100, you had the Divine Comedy, which is just biblical fan fiction written by Dante Alighieri.
I have not thought about that. You know what? I'm going to start telling kids like, so the next time that your English teacher gives you crap, reminder that Dante was writing biblical fan fiction.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, to jump off yours, Paradise Lost is absolutely Lucifer fan fiction. It's like we're going to make him a tragic hero, and and Milton wrote a beautiful book based off of that. Yeah, it's and there's a really great history of that. Like the Aeneid is the Roman version of the Greek Iliad. Fanfic, like, and like I being very guilty of being the guy that beats myself up for like, no, this is something that somebody else has done, but that's like writing. You write your own version of something, which is why in my writing personally, and I'll send it to Josh, I'll send my stuff to Will. Like my first draft of stuff will probably be based off of whatever the hell I was reading or watching at the time, and then like as that matures and I get to mix that into more of a cocktail, it becomes its own thing with influence, as opposed to it's finding your voice in that thing that you love, that I think is really interesting when it comes down to storytelling.
Yeah, I'm like a huge lover of mythology, and Carey can attest to this. Like every time I get writing from Carey, I'm always like comparing it to like different mythologies or different legends that I've heard, and like I think those kind of come back to that universal identity that we have as humans, as humans share of this type of storytelling, where there are things that are constantly and cyclically coming back and have just that profound impact on human society.
I do a workshop called "There is only 7 stories in the world," and it's true. It's like
good
fighting the
too.
monster. It's a tragedy. It's a it's a rom-com. Kind of, or so that, like breaking it down. And so when people would come in and see me sometimes at the library, like, oh my gosh, Sarah, I have a story that has never been heard before. It's totally different. Nobody's doing it. I'm like, okay, well, give me 5 minutes, and I can find you like 3 comps. Movie comps, because movies I can do faster because you put in those key words. So like, it's a tragedy. Well, is it a tragedy like Romeo and Juliet? Is it like more of like a, the self-destructive kind of thing, or that idea of like, but that's what you want to know. So again, talking about the universal specific, you want to know which box it fits into, but then how are you going to polish it and make it something different and unique that people haven't heard of before?
See, now that's a really interesting mentality, because one of the things that I really think people overdo is they look at Joseph Campbell's The Hero with Many Faces, and they try and break everything down into the monomyth, and the monomyth is much more supposed to be this like explanatory structure, as opposed to it being a guide. Because what Joseph Campbell really did was he studied and amalgamated these similarities between and he also had like his own like there is only one story concept. But really what he did was he amalgamated and he broke things down, and some things didn't quite fit and he still made them. But like he broke out like this general rule. But where I think people go wrong is people very much look at writing or telling a story as like, I don't get it. Like people say I don't get it because they think it needs to be a certain thing, when actually like some of the best stories are not. First thing that comes to mind is Slaughterhouse-Five. Like that's an entirely unique breakdown of a story, because it's a weird sci-fi that's told through like a 4th dimensional lens. That's not something you saw a lot. The movie Maniac, the original one, is even the more recent one with Elijah Wood. It's a first-person serial killer movie. Like that's not a format that people really screwed with at the time. And the fact that you have things that like are in, like the best things are like rule breakers, in my opinion, and they break the rules in specific ways to make something more interesting. This is my favorite part about learning advanced literature and the like.
So I have a poll here. So because we're all writers and we were studying like plot and stuff, can you actually enjoy a movie, or is your brain going, okay, this is going to happen? Okay, they made a big deal about this in the first third, so this is the thing that's going to save the day at the end, because you've been reading too much Save the Cat. And the idea of like,
Yes.
I know it's a good movie when I stop analyzing it.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
I go full story trance. When I walk into a movie theater, I am a dumb person. I usually go into a movie to enjoy a movie. There are very few movies that I go into like I'm going to organize. I'm not going to like this, because I usually end up finding something that I enjoy. But I've also sat through some bad movies, and when a movie's bad enough for my ass to get taken out of it and start analyzing it, that's how I know it's pretty bad.
Mine is like, oh, you're an old white dude with a long beard and robes. Oh, you're not making it to the end of the movie. We'll lose at the 75% point.
Mentor figure.
Yeah.
Get out of here.
Yeah. But I think kind of a really interesting example of a movie that I don't know if it did anything that's necessarily has never been done before, but like Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Yes.
That
I've not
if
seen
you're
that yet, but I've heard it's good.
Oh, it's amazing.
Brilliant.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, if you found this channel, it was probably through us discussing that video, honestly.
That's our one big video is our podcast on that.
Yeah, we spent an hour and a half just being dorks about it.
It's absolute, like, I can't describe the movie because it doesn't make any sense, but it does as you're watching it. And there's nothing that I can really say that movie does. Like, if I describe any little piece of it, it's not necessarily that, like, if I say, oh, there's like a multiverse, like there's 7 multiverse movies that just came out this year. Or, oh, there's like action, or there's kung fu, or there's this, unless you get into like some of the really ridiculous things that happen in that movie, which just I want to say don't make sense out of context, but they barely make sense in context. But that's not the point because of the movie, because while all of this is happening, really the point of the movie is that there is an underlying theme of like interpersonal conflict and how to handle that, and how to manage communicating with somebody that you might not necessarily share that much with on a surface level. And I'm trying to be vague because I don't want to spoil the movie, and I don't want to confuse anybody who hasn't seen it. But I think
it's a good movie with like with what you're saying. Like technically it's a fairly simple story and through line, but the plot is broken up into such I mean, it's even literally broken up into an act 1, 2, and 3, like by title cards. But the way that it goes about telling the story, and the breadth of it is what makes it so fun. Because it's also one of those movies that like it's almost kind of that postmodern thing that with like that postmodern, like, oh, we're totally aware that we're a movie, you know. It goes that one step past Deadpool, which, by the way, I love the Deadpool movies and the comics. Like, I think they did it right, especially because it's a labor of love for Ryan Reynolds, but that's a different story. But yeah, Everything Everywhere All at Once is exactly that thing. It's like it is aware that it is aware, and but it is also extremely earnest and heartfelt about itself. And that's kind of like what Will was saying. That's kind of its strength too.
Yes, thank you for saying what I said in a way that people understand. Just need Carey to translate for me.
So Sarah, what are some of your favorite movies or examples of like really solid theme explorations in film or in books?
Ooh, right now, the one I would love to talk about is Black Panther. Black Panther is one of my favorite Marvel. So even though I have a Wonder Woman shirt on, I actually like Marvel movies better.
Same here.
Me to say that, but I do. But I love Black Panther, and actually, I really like Shang-Chi also. And the reason why I like both of those movies so much is because they were in their own, for the most part, they were in their own world, and so all the characters were kind of the same, and they were the same, and yet they were completely different. And this is one of the things that I tell people when they're trying to create characters, especially diverse characters, is to take that one character and make them deeper than, okay, we have the band of people here, and we have the one woman, okay, or we have a band of white people, and we have the one black person, or we have all the straight people and one gay person, so that they're filling that role of like the one thing that somebody's different. But if you want to play with it and check to make sure that you're going on a deeper level in your characterization, is to pretend like that person looks like everybody else looks like them. So for example, in Black Panther, you know, we have Shuri, we have Nakia, and we have Okoye. There are 3 black women. There are 3 black women who are warriors. They have 3 different roles in Black Panther's world. So, you know, Shuri is the tech girl. You know, we have Nakia, who is a spy. We have Okoye, who is like the uber warrior. So they have 3 different things.
General, she's amazing.
She's different. And beyond, like, she's the bald one. He's like, well, she is the bald one, but all the Dora Milaje who are very Amazonish, which I would watch a whole movie just on the Dora Milaje and Okoye.
Yes.
I totally would. Please do that. Somebody make that happen.
Oh, they're probably going to rob
idea
me.
of like not only who they are and what their role is of spy, the tech person, it's like their relationship to the main character. So Shuri is, the princess of Wakanda. So she's next in line. So her relationship is different with T'Challa than Nakia, who is his lover. They've been childhood friends forever. And then we have Okoye, who has no romantic relationship. She's married to his best friend. So that takes that equation out too, so that we don't have a harem thing going. So there are very three different ones. Okoye is married to his best friend. She is the person that he trusts the most, maybe next to Nakia. So just watching how they interact with him. And then if you go back in the canon a little bit, and somebody who knows a little bit more about X-Men, correct me if I'm wrong, is that idea that Storm actually is connected to, did he not, either they were lovers or she was married to him at one point? Somebody
depends on the comic, but
yep.
yes,
that's been retconned
somebody's
to help.
Canon. Storm. So the idea of the person, the childhood friend versus the new person who comes in as the love interest has a different lens. And so that's what I love to play with. So moving deeper than just surface level kind of stuff. So making sure that your characters all have those layers beyond like, well, they just look different on the outside. Okay, no, you're gonna have to go deeper than that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're like, I'm just patting myself on the back because see how diverse I am. Now I'm writing
it's
stereotypes.
the difference between diversity and tokenism, where you're not just, and that I feel like that gets a lot of pushback, and unfortunately, like it's often done so poorly that there's legitimate criticism that ends up then kind of going into not legitimate criticism. To put it nicely, but where a lot of movies will just put in like a black character, and there's no reason necessarily for that character to be of any race, which in that case, fine, it doesn't matter if it's not going to matter. But you have like forced roles where you put in a character that doesn't make sense, or you try to bend something just to pat yourself on the back of like, okay, this character is gay for no reason, and we're just going to put that in there just so that the fans can say, oh yeah, there's a gay character, aren't we so progressive? Versus like when you have an actual romance that happens. And I think Owl House actually, which I'm I'm a huge fan of a lot of some of the newer Disney shows, but Owl House does a pretty good job where they have chemistry with two of the main female characters, and it doesn't actually it doesn't take anything from the show, but it's written in a way that actually flows through, instead of like going to I'm trying to remember who did it in the comics, like Marvel had a couple that wanted to make one of the X-Men gay, and so they decided, oh yeah, Iceman has actually been gay this entire time, and oh look, he's kissing his boyfriend. Aren't we progressives? Now we're gonna push them off to the side after the first 2 pages and everybody forget that ever happened. So now the evangelicals don't come after us.
So
yeah, you had Bobby Drake and then North Star and Colossus in the Ultimate ones, which was fun. I thought it was written pretty interestingly, but that kind of went weird.
So I just did a panel at Phoenix Fan Fusion with Danny Hoots, who was that's
Danny, our friend on the podcast.
Yeah. So and our friend James Ramos, and the two of them, we did a panel about writing and creating for Generation Z and Generation Alpha. So alphas are all the kids under 10 years old. So they have these are the kids like, we're still struggling with like everybody can have a seat at the table, and these kids are like, no, we expect it, and we'll call you out on your BS. And then you think about like the youngest kids who have been home through the pandemic, and a lot of families like, first you watch all the things that you would normally watch, and then we made a joke about like, oh well, I finished Netflix and moving on to Hulu. But the idea that we started watching things from around the world is like, okay, don't like subtitles and dubs and stuff, but you know what? I love spy things. So you know what? I'm gonna watch Lupin, and I'm gonna watch it in French. And the man who plays Lupin is a character that's been in French canon for a long time. They did it. He's an African man who speaks French, and he's always lived in France and stuff. But that idea of like taking those things and turning it on its head. So my favorite story is I have a friend of mine whose child loves Peppa Pig. So Peppa Pig is a British show, and so her daughter came up to her one day and said, "Mummy, it's like a biscuit." And she's like, "Whose child is this?" So that idea of like they are absorbing stuff from around the world, and if you're like, we're just going to go back to like, the normals, like, no, so it doesn't matter what you think about adult stuff, and I won't even touch that diversity kind of stuff, but the idea of if you are creating for Generation Z and Generation Alpha, you have got to up your game and try to move away really well. You got to be woke. And I'll get pushback for that too. But the idea of like, okay, so how do you educate yourself? Because the conversation is always changing, the language is always changing, and so even if you feel like, oh, okay, I've got a handle on it, you won't, because and just that idea of like it's always changing. So one of the things we were suggesting are some movies and things that we felt like people did a good job, maybe not perfect job, but a good job. So mine was the new Hawkeye. So Hawkeye is my least favorite Avenger.
That's why I haven't seen the show yet. I'm like in the same boat.
I know, see, that's why every people are going to watch it. I loved it. I absolutely loved it, because one of the bad guys in Hawkeye in canon is Echo, and she was written as a Native American woman who is deaf, and she is an amputee with one of her legs. So who did they cast? A Native American woman who's deaf and is an amputee. So the idea is like, wow. And so they have one iconic scene. So let me back up a little bit. So with Clint, because he is not super powered or he can't regenerate his hearing, he's been blowing stuff up and stuff has been exploding around him without anything to protect his ears. So he's lost his hearing. And so he has like completely no hearing in one ear, and he has hearing aids in the other. And so there are several scenes where he either breaks his hearing aid or he doesn't want to hear the conversation, so he just turns it off. And he's learned how to sign. So he signs to some of his kids. And there's a big scene where he and Echo come together, and she does not talk. She only signs. So they're actually signing to each other. And she's like, "Wait a minute, you're deaf?" And he's like, "No, I'm hard of hearing, or I'm hearing impaired." So that idea of like there's all this big conversation, which I just think is fascinating. And we see it in that, and then we see it in Miss Marvel too. So a lot of people are like, I don't know if I watch Miss Marvel. I love Miss Marvel, and that's not just because she reminds me of like how Tom Holland plays Spider-Man. He's my favorite Spider-Man because he makes me believe that he is a teenager.
Oh yeah, he's super enthusiastic. Yeah, he's super enthusiastic about it, and that's what's cool. Yeah.
And so with Miss Marvel, with Kamala Khan, they do such a great job because she is Pakistani. So she is, she looks, Southeast Asian, but she's also Muslim. So that idea of like, that's different. Not everybody is the same. And so again, they're having the conversations within their community of going to the mosque, and the girls, even though she's like the superpower, that she still has to be in the back. And her friend chooses to wear a hijab where she doesn't. And so there's like all these really nuanced conversations that I feel like I'm learning stuff, but not in a hit you over the head kind of thing. So the idea of like, you can sit down and watch the first couple episodes, and it's not your bag, but just the idea of like, oh, this is fascinating. But she does remind me, because she is a teenager, a true, authentic teenage voice versus something like Riverdale. Riverdale is, sit down with mom and dad, have a nice Chardonnay, and then we're going to plot how to kill them. So, okay. I watched a couple of the seasons and then I tapped out of Riverdale. But
I had the same thing with Sabrina, the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, because it was like I like the old Charlton comics. I like kind of the revamp that they were going for, but it was just like, I don't know. Like there was just something that felt inauthentic about it by the end. For Sabrina, it wasn't the age. It was like it just wasn't fun after a certain point, even though like a lot of the aesthetic was cool. So like, yeah, kind of similar thing with Riverdale. It's like, all right, like I got it.
Riverdale went off the rails because they were in such an adult world, and then they tried to dial it back to be teenagers. So they had one episode. It's like, oh my gosh, the SATs are tomorrow, and I'm not ready. No, it's like, dude, you almost died last week. The last thing you would be concerned about is your SAT score. You're like, you need some serious help and therapy because you have PTSD from, and it's your dad too. So that kind of thing. So so it was ridiculous, and it just didn't ring true.
Yeah, and I think it's that understanding of like actually understanding of what teenagers go through and what teenagers think, which you'd think everybody having had to grow up like would have some understanding of that, but for some reason you end up seeing like a lot of just adults who seem to have completely forgotten about like what it was like to be 15 trying to write for this child of various ages, where I'm not always entirely sure when it's just a generic teenager, even with the different writing that you end up getting. But Miss Marvel, I think, is also a great, because you do mention like she's a Muslim character, and like she is actually like a full-fledged character who is Muslim. And I like to like think about that versus like the Super Friends, where you had what was his name, like Indian Chief or whatever.
Apache Chief, yeah.
Apache Chief, thank you.
We're all like, ooh.
Know exactly who you're talking
Interrupt
about.
you for just 1 second. So when my kids were younger, when we went to Japan, I would always like inflict. I would get like vintage stuff, like vintage Super Friends from the 70s. We watched The Bionic Woman. We watched Shazam and ISIS, which that's another thing that went off the rails. But that idea of we would watch stuff and they were like, Mom, this is so bad, so bad. So just the idea of like we're all changing, and, you know, things are changing and getting a little bit. It's like, oh, that would never fly today. Like,
Yeah.
I think we're getting a lot of progress because people are being they're examining their own intentions in the storytelling. And I think that when your intention is to be inclusive and explorative and really have nuanced conversations, like you guys have all said, I think that's where we get this really compelling storyline, as opposed to making it feel like we're checking off boxes. And so I think that the intention of the storyteller is where all that comes from. And so I think that's why we get these really quality pieces now, because people with good intentions are finally getting the system to say, yeah, we want you to tell your story, and giving them the resources, and it's coming to the forefront. So that's really exciting, you know.
I agree. I agree in a big way.
When I work with people in the library and we're talking about, you know, even if their book is almost ready, it's like you need to have your platform down. Know that you need to know, why are you the person to tell this story? Is this, you know, the thing that you've always studied? You know, did you live abroad? You know, is this your, or are you just doing research? Because I can do research. I was a journalist first, but you know, is it my story to tell? And so that was a hard one for a couple of people. It's like, is it your story to tell? Are you sure?
Interesting.
Maybe it's not.
Yeah. I think also, like when you are working with people with kids and teenagers who are learning to express themselves creatively, there is a certain amount of like trying to break that mentality of like everything I have to do has to be original, and get into the mentality of, okay, this isn't going to be a story that nobody's ever heard before. It's going to be a story that only I can tell, as being like when you're trying to be original.
Yeah,
it's true.
Sarah, I had a quick question for you. I know that we're going a little overtime, but this has been a delightful podcast. We've talked about some really cool stuff. When you're working with kids, like what's the biggest challenge that you found in trying to teach them to be creative and true to their own artistic voice? Like what's kind of the biggest obstacle that you've had to face?
The rubric writing. Doing have to do all, like we in Arizona, we have the Ames testing and stuff, that all the testing kind of stuff just kills your creativity, because it needs to be as perfect straight out of the gate as possible. And so the workshop that I do with teams the most is called Unleashing Your Creativity. And what I do is I play pieces of music. I don't tell them anything about it. I just play the piece of music. And like I use the Wonder Woman song, Is She With You? The da 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 da. So really cool. Like it tells a story in itself. So I'll play them, like, so I played them part of the Battlestar Galactica theme song.
Oh, Bear McCreary is the man. And yes.
Yeah, Bear McCreary. He's awesome. He writes such Alan Silvestri writes great stuff. One of the pieces I use is from Van Helsing. So there's like, and so that idea of like,
Oh,
what
good one.
came into your brain, there's no wrong answer. You don't have to write complete sentences. I don't care about punctuation. I just want you to barf as fast as you can on this paper what you saw in your brain. And then we're like, okay, what did you say? Well, I saw, like in Van Helsing, the song I used, I saw a girl on horseback. Oh, I was in the woods too. You're like, oh, okay. Well, who was chasing? Well, a dragon was chasing. He's like, I don't know, mine was a dragon or harpy, but it had claws. Oh, and then somebody be like, I was under the ocean, and there are no wrong answers, and so it takes them a couple songs to kind of like loosen up a little bit, and then we just like, okay, that, and then we do a round robin. So this was kind of a new thing that I did last time, where I gave them a prompt like, I didn't want to do it, but I had to, ... and you get 2 minutes. And I write, you write something, 2 minutes, it's up. Everybody passes to the right. You have like a minute to read over what they wrote before, and then you add to it. And so we just get around and around and around and around, and it's just learning how to have fun,
really cool
again, and play, and not be like it has to be perfect, and I have to get an A+, and I have to make my English teacher proud of me. I was like, let's just play.
That's wonderful. I love that.
Yeah, that's a really good way to build up some of those skills that you really need when you're being a writer, like getting those basic skills down.
Yeah, and learning how to write quickly. So if you've ever done like NaNoWriMo, that's the point of NaNoWriMo, the National Novel Writing, is you're supposed to write 50,000 words in 1 month, because a lot of times people get stuck rewriting the first 5 chapters over and over and over and over. So when I do it, like I give myself permission, like, okay, this went off the rails and I wrote myself into a corner. It's like, new chapter, moving on, or like something more here later, moving on to the next thing. And my favorite one is, have you guys done NaNoWriMo?
I have not, but I know exactly what you're saying, because for many, many years, I would do the same thing where I would write a couple chapters and then I would go back and edit them ad nauseum. And then when I finally let go of that and said, I'm going to get a complete draft of a book, I don't care if it's good or not. I have a story I want to tell. I'm going to write it. And then once we have that completed first draft, we can go from there. And that's how I was able to publish my first 2 books, finally embracing that concept. So, yeah.
Because you leave yourself a trail of breadcrumbs. You're like, okay, I didn't pay it off. And when I go around to do the second round, I need to make sure that I pay this off. But you'll find like, oh, here's a theme I was not planning. This character, every time they come on the page, they steal the show. They're gonna have to get their own book. Or one of the things about NaNoWriMo is I sleep write sometimes. So if you've done NaNoWriMo and around like Thanksgiving, like you're behind in your words, you're like, I'm gonna stay up late. Everybody else has gone to bed. It's Thanksgiving weekend. I've had like 3 pieces of pie. So I'm kind of like, woo! It's 2 a.m. I am typing and literally falling asleep as I'm typing. And the next morning, sometimes I get up and like, I don't remember writing this. So the idea of like the inner critic has gone to sleep, and what comes out is more natural and empowered, and like I trust my voice and stuff. Like, I don't know who wrote this, but it was really good, and I'm totally going to run with this. But yeah, that's happened multiple times where I'm just sort of like, highly recommend if you're stuck.
That's awesome. Yeah, just letting it free flow. I love that. Well, guys, do you have any more questions for Sarah?
I think our inner critic is the worst, because we're like, oh, somebody's going to read that and judge me. My mom is going to read that scene. Oh, I'm going to be so embarrassed. And it's really hard to let your authentic self come through. And then when you write for kids, then you have like, oh, are they going to drag me? Are they going to drag me on Twitter? Are they going to, are the people the parents going to come after me? So there is that, whereas like, no, you have to believe in your voice, and that's why you have like editors and stuff to push back on, do you really want to do this? And for me, one of the biggest scenes, and I still get a lot of pushback on it, is in Every Reason We Shouldn't, there is a school lockdown scene. There is no guns. The children are never hurt. They're never in danger, but they don't know that. And so I have been in a school teaching when it went into lockdown. It was scary as hell. Because in my time we would hide under the desks for like earthquake drills. But that idea of, I was in a 3rd grade classroom teaching them how to write, and it was just scary as hell. And so when I wrote the scene, Tor Teen said, we're gonna get pushback on this. Are you really sure you want to go there? I'm like, yes, I do. I'm like, are you sure you want to go there? I'm like, yes, I do. And he's like, you will get 1-star reviews over this. And I have gotten like pushback on it, and yet you could read the news. So it's there. It's there, and I'm not going to shy away from it. But knowing that which hills you are willing to just like die on. I hate to say that was terrible. But the idea of like, what are you willing to stand up for?
Yeah,
And
that's a really good way of putting it.
Yeah. Being in
what
touch
are
with
you
your
willing to
authentic
stand up
self
and
is
take the
great.
heat?
Yes.
So the other thing that wasn't quite as controversial is like knowing when you're coming into it, what you're willing to change and what you're not willing to change. So for me, I said I am willing to change this, and this, but the character of Jonah and also Leo and the other one is like they must be biracial Asian boys. Do not whitewash them. They will be Asian boys. They can be full Asian boys, they can be half Asian boys, but we will not whitewash them just to make this right. So because that's what my family looks like, and we're writing what my family looks like. I'm writing for my now adult son because we lost him to Japanese culture. So like, very early on, because in Japanese culture, he can be the hero, the love interest, the villain, the tech guy, the guy that eats all the time, the funny guy. He could be all those things. And American literature and stuff didn't have it. So we lost him to it.
Yeah.
It's sometimes what you need.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. That's wonderful. Sarah, thank you so much for your time. This has been a delightful podcast. And I just want to remind all our viewers.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just want to remind our viewers to check out your website, sarafujimura.com. And the link will be in the description of the video or the audio file here. And we just really appreciate your time. This has been a delightful conversation.
Yeah, thanks for talking with us.
My pleasure. Yeah. And I hope to see Carey at SubletonCon in September.
Yes.
I'll come by and say hi.
Awesome. Well, this has been Nerds and Friends. Thanks so much for listening.